Hold on to your butt.
Come on, sucker. Let's get it on.
Oh, you want to fight? You want to fight?
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
You don't know anybody named Iris? I don't know nobody named Iris.
Can I have a piece of toast?
I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
How could you do this to me? Really, I want to know.
Why did you do that? What you feel only matters to you.
Step back for 1 minute and look at the big picture.
And that's all.
No, not for the real fire.
We offer you a bond, a family that very few can understand.
Help me.
Help you.
And don't do drugs.
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I am your co-host Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today, we are talking David Fincher's Netflix original film, Mank.
Mank. Just say it, Mank.
Yeah, Mank. What's up, Mank?
So this is a new entry for Netflix, and David Fincher movies, this is his longest span between movies. His last movie was Gone Girl, like 6 years ago. So when a David Fincher movie shows up, you sit up and take notice. Gary Oldman, no slouch. I thought we should watch this one, right?
Yeah, this is kind of our first awards season entry.
And as such, went into this movie knowing zero about it. Got Kelly on board. What's Mank about? That's an ambiguous title. I don't know, but we're about to find out.
Nothing? Like not even a Citizen Kane reference?
Nothing. So, did you know anything about Mank going in? Because I didn't even read the blurb on Netflix.
All I knew was something I had seen in a Deadline article where Gary Oldman talked about Mankiewicz accepting the Academy Award like in real life in Orson Welles' absence. Like I knew that there was some kind of credit scandal or something associated with Citizen Kane.
Okay, I didn't even know that. So you can imagine how that went, given that no one said the words Citizen or Kane until the very end when Citizen Kane was awarded its Oscar for screenwriting.
Is that true?
Well, in the movie, nobody said either of those two words. They didn't even say the original title that I discovered was Mankiewicz's screenplay title, which was The American, or which was American.
Because I had the context, I didn't realize that they never said the title. And I find it kind of hard to believe in all of the creative discussions that he and Orson Welles had, or he and the producer Houseman had. But I guess that makes sense. I watched the first half of this movie twice. And the first time, I think I understood and retained almost nothing, like frustratingly so.
Yeah, I estimated about a quarter.
And then I watched it again. And this is definitely not a washer. This is a watcher, to use your nomenclature. And I was like all attentive and like leaning forward and paying attention. And thankfully, I was able to kind of piece it together. And I have some kind of weird satisfaction for having kind of understood this film. Not that I understand all the contexts, political, both studio and governmental, but I understood the structure of this film.
And not to suggest that I didn't know anything about the content. We live in Southern California. We are producers and we know something about Hearst. We've seen Citizen Kane. We knew about yellow journalism and things. It's just I didn't know starting off who Mankiewicz was and that he was the screenwriter for Citizen Kane. So being that I have that context, I was able to grasp before they ever said the title of the movie, which one they were working on, especially when Hearst came up, who eventually they just lapsed into calling Willie. But I gotta imagine for someone without that context, this is a film made about filmmaking, about filmmakers. And if you are in any way on the outside, it's got to be a difficult breach, right? I'm sure for people who love that movie and have watched it a million times, there are lots of references like Mayer kind of shouting into the microphone during the political rally or the political event where they were counting down the votes. I'm sure that a lot of these scenes were meant to mirror and thus conceivably inspire some of the Citizen Kane work. Like he sees Mayer up there kind of raging on the microphone at the podium. And, I can put that into the movie. In the same way that when Orson Welles has his rager at the end and starts throwing stuff, Mank is like, oh, that's good. We can use that physical acting out as a, when she leaves Kane.
Yeah, in the totally anticlimactic climax.
And in the anticlimax. I guess the point being that if you know Citizen Kane backwards and forwards, there may be a whole lot in this movie where you're like, oh, see, that scene looks like Citizen Kane. It must have influenced it because that was part of Mank's life, thereby lending credibility to the idea that maybe he wrote this movie entirely in Wells's absence.
Yeah, I think this movie was, I hope I'm not overusing the term, recursive in its self-referentialness. And certainly technique-wise, like they were implementing all kinds of Citizen Kane-esque filmmaking techniques.
Tell me about it.
Like some of the kind of cutesy blocking where you hold a paper or map or something up and then you open up on a big wide, and there's that and all the dips to black.
In addition, we had lots of flares. This is probably the most since J.J. Abrams' movie from back in the day. We have the cigarette burns suggesting the changes of reels. That was cute. Fincher mentioned that before in Fight Club and stuff. My question is the acting and the blocking and the camera techniques. I get that it was meant to evoke films of that style, but also the sensibility of how films were to be made. Was the acting period as well? Was it intentionally sort of grand and explosive, but otherwise maybe just a touch false to the ear?
I think that the acting was felt pretty contemporary. It didn't feel acty, stiff, or staged. Brian also mentioned that they used old-timey microphones. I guess, I'm assuming the hardware.
It wasn't quite the level of old-timey radio. Did Herman Mankiewicz write for Citizen Kane all by his lonesome? Let's find out. But at the same time, there were so many things like that. They used, I guess, were they like condenser microphones or were they compression microphones, something like that, because they definitely altered the audio. The audio was a big hang up in this production, but they shot this thing entirely on modern digital 8K red cameras in black and white. So no color cut of this film exists in any form. Fincher's insistence on doing it that way actually led to a lot of delays because this movie, written by his late father back in like 2003, possibly before that, has been around for a long time. Nobody wanted to make it like Fincher wanted to make it. Netflix apparently is pretty good about this kind of stuff. So they're like, yeah, go do your Mankiewicz movie. I don't know if certain weird things that stood out to me, like all the weird lens flares, were intentional, or if that was a byproduct of the processing of this digital footage, or what. But even the fan in the background was noticeably strange. The fire behind Mank in Hearst's, when he was drunkenly ranting over the dinner party, was obviously fake. I don't know if it was a treatment of actual fire or if it was an effect, but everything looked dated to me. There was even this weird distortion, like a light distortion around his pen when he was writing at one point. It felt like an old movie before restoration. And I wonder how much of that was intentional and how many great lengths they went to achieve that effect.
I got the sense that a lot of those effects were employed to kind of project something about Mankiewicz's mindset. It seemed to me to be story motivated, like in particular, like when he wakes up at Marion Davies' film shoot, like it feels really blown out and overexposed, and like you would feel if you had a hangover and you woke up in broad daylight, or the scene where he's drunk and stumbling around and going into his whole like diatribe in front of Louis B. Mayer and WR and his whole carnival party
circus.
I don't know, whatever it was. So, all that to say that when he was stumbling around and monologuing, like it felt like kind of vignetted and claustrophobic, and it felt like a lot of those effects were employed to support the story, to what level of effort they had to go to employ them, whether practically or in post, I don't know. But it seemed like they were motivated.
And maybe the most obvious editorial choices were made in the election results, the sort of surreal montage, a close-up of headlines and eyes in close-up and that kind of thing. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, when he's at the party, but also, kind of story motivated as he's, I'm presuming, getting drunker and drunker.
Sure. It just seemed to be the most obvious throwback to a style of filmmaking and editing that we would be familiar with from the period, from Hitchcock. Definitely. And things like that. So going back to the party, I was a little bit lost for a lot of this. We were so far removed from the politics of the time that even if we were able to keep up with the rapid fire banter and the quips, it still is a lot to ingest, right? Even if we weren't already removed by, 80 years? But pretty safe to say that Hearst and his parties were the epitome, the highest of high society, dressed up in costume. And it's funny to see Mank show up in his all disheveled in his suit, shouting with his cigar and his drink and stuff. And then people would get up like, I simply will not tolerate listening to this. And they would storm out of the dining room and put on like their safari hat on their way out the door. But like, where are you going? Are you going to wander around some other dude's palatial estate on top of the hill?
They're going to go into the topiary maze or the Great Ballroom or something.
You don't get up from someone else's dinner party if a guest crashes and starts talking crap.
Well, I don't know. Hearst was awfully indulgent of Mank in that. I was like, how far is he going to let this go? Oh, he's going to go until everybody has been so offended that they're going to indignantly storm out of the dining room. Like, he let him go really far, probably too far for a host, like, who has other guests to kind of consider.
Right.
But I guess there was a point to it.
Or just far enough to where he could clear out most of the room except for Mayer, and then, take Mank by the shoulder and then push him into the fire.
Yeah, I thought something much darker or menacing was going to happen. Instead, he gives him this. And I was also looking into the organ grinder's monkey parable thing for deeper meaning, because I was like,
it's a little bit ominous sounding, right?
Definitely. And I have a confession about that, which I'll tell you in just a minute. But I was really trying to read into it. Like, is there some kind of veiled threat in there?
Right.
So I have to say that I didn't think that the organ grinder monkey was a monkey dialing a little organ. I thought that the monkey was a pet of the organ grinder butcher who was like, I'll let you be my pet until I grind you up and I put you into a hamburger.
He's like Sweeney Todd. He's back there turning the organ grinder and like grinding up the man's victims.
Maybe because I was really looking for something so much darker and so much more ominous. I really thought that the parable was saying, like, be careful what how you dance around out there, because one day you're going to get caught up in the organ grinder.
Fincher is smart enough that he knows to trade on those things. He knows that it does sound ominous, and Hearst is meant to be an ominous figure, even if he's not going to do anything to Mank, especially considering that it was in flashback when all that happened, right?
That's true.
But we're also talking about Charles Dance here. He was Sardo Numspa.
Sardo Numspa?
Yeah, the golden dude. You can't. My dear sweet brother Numsy.
Dude. Mind blown. Are you telling me like 30 years have passed since Numspa became Lannister?
A long time. I mean, Golden Child was what, 88? 80?
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
It's funny because his performance is pretty much, Charles Dance has had his thing dialed in back in the 80s.
Yeah, and what else? And of course, he worked with Fincher before in Alien 3. But what's the other major role I'm thinking of? Not Game of Thrones, not Golden Child, but Last Action Hero. But anyway, I don't know what major role or that anybody. But the point is, he plays a bad guy, and additionally, he plays a British bad guy because he's British, and a lot of people in this movie were British, Gary Oldman among them, all of them affecting American accents, which was a little bit curious to me.
Including Lily Collins,
right,
who I thought was his other typewriting assistant, Lily James, from The Darkest Hour.
Oh, yeah. I remember Lily James from Cinderella and Baby Driver.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Downton
She
Abbey,
had a good year.
Yeah, but you know who also had a good year is Lily Collins, who was surprisingly strong. I know Lily Collins from that stupid Mirror, Mirror, Snow White movie, because I worked on the show with two of the little people that were the dwarfs, and they kept on talking about Mirror, Mirror being their big break into acting. And I was like, really, this one?
The Julia Roberts movie?
Right, exactly, that nobody saw. The point is, I was like, why is Lily Collins in this movie? And actually, she surprised me. She was a good...
Britishy?
I thought that she was a good counterpart to Mank, and it was nice to see actors that I wouldn't ordinarily have thought could carry this kind of weight do their thing. I thought the guy who played Orson Welles was eerily appropriate, and I don't know who that was, but it worked for me. And
Tom Burke.
And Amanda Seyfried was good as the ingenue, I guess. She played a real person, maybe not quite portrayed accurately in the movie, but neither here nor there. It was nice to see people act convincingly because, if nothing else, this movie was full of high caliber performances and high caliber filmmaking that might have been just a little bit unwieldy for Netflix and chill.
Yeah, it's not exactly a lean back kind of fun Friday night popcorn fare. All of the women, I thought, really well cast in that, yeah, they could go up against the formidable Gary Oldman, who is ironically kind of at its best when his characters are at their worst. And all of the women in his life are counterpoint to that, right? Because as airheady as Amanda Seyfried's Marion Davies might have been, she had some real substance to her performance. And Lily Collins is basically everything that Herman Mankiewicz is not, and like pinnacle of health and loyalty and stuff. Even his wife, poor Sarah,
Don't call her. I insist you not call her poor Sarah anymore.
I think those were literally her last words in the film.
As she went to go and stare a horse in the face.
She hadn't been riding in years.
No, she hadn't seen a horse's face in years. It was always the horse's ass for her. It's very quippy. It's very, yeah.
Well, the whole thing was written that way. I mean, it's like people, you're like, how witty can these people really be? Like
Aaron Sorkin level witty.
Exactly. Like people don't really talk this way, and it's kind of, you kind of feel dumb just trying to keep up with them. But I mean, I thought that these three women were all kind of different and distinct in their own way. And showed that, you know, as kind of unrepentant as the main character might have been, he at least had the good sense to keep some good people around him.
Right. And thankfully he did, because we needed those people. Hearst was kind of this untouchable king on the hill. Mayer was so far removed from normal people. Like he's just one of those studio men. And I don't understand why he dropped the handkerchief outside the car after the funeral. But even Mank was such an elevated character. It's like, how does one get close to this person in life? You would need someone as extreme as Orson Welles to have a Mank that you can utilize to the best of his abilities. Now, these ladies were loyal to him, and especially the lady whose entire village he helped out, or he was benefactor to. That was all admirable.
Oh, yeah.
But these quote-unquote normal people were sort of our inroads to some of these characters. Marion in particular, I think we were meant to identify maybe with more as a contemporary sort of person, and Mank being from a slightly different school and Hearst being from a different class. But Marion at one point says to Mank, you know, I hate this shop talk. I never know what's going on. And I was like, you got that right, sister. Like, we can bypass.
She's speaking for all of us.
Right? We can bypass all of the political stuff and just kind of go outside and smoke a cigarette and sit on the bench and kind of figure out what we're really doing there, because all that shop talk is artifice, right? It's posturing, and it's trying to make sure that you're a contributing member of this high society socialite kind of vibe.
It's not like she's some kind of misfit. She certainly fits into this, and as WR's girlfriend kind of maintains a certain kind of status. But she does kind of speak for all of us, and him kind of educating her on the ways of the world was touching and kind of a nice scene, and he was kind of like fatherly toward her, which made you feel better about their platonic affair.
So all of that was help in exposition to be able to kind of dumb it down for the masses, I guess. And right. I don't mind admitting that I was one of those dumb people who I told Kelly afterwards, I got maybe a quarter of the actual content of that movie. And so you try to break it down from a filmmaking perspective, but at times inaccessible. And like I said, if you don't know even the story about Citizen Kane, if you're left to figure it out, you know, from a cold start, it's a long road to hoe.
I mean, you got to be kind of fresh. Like, you can't be falling asleep. You got to have the subtitles turned on.
We did.
And you got to pay attention.
And if that weren't hard enough, did you find the time jumps, the endless time jumps, confusing?
No, I tracked it. I mean, the lower thirds helped. And what was weird to me was that all the political stuff was present day, and it gave the political B story like a ton more weight than I think was necessary. Like, did you feel like the whole Upton Sinclair political conspiracy and the propaganda films and all that stuff were really that important to the story?
And that is what leads me to believe that if one were more entrenched in this world, if you had a much firmer grasp of not only Citizen Kane, but of the politics surrounding, swirling around Citizen Kane and Hearst at the time, this movie would offer a treasure trove that we simply didn't tap into, that we never made use of. But also, was the political stuff contemporary? Because everything that happened with Hearst was fodder for his ultimate crafting of the Kane character in Citizen Kane, because the modern stuff all took place after the Depression, after the studio stuff, and while he was convalescing from his car accident.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so even the diatribe or the monologuing at the Hearst Castle, we knew he wasn't going to be barbecued and then thrown to the organ grinder monkey to be made into pies, because he was going to survive to the present and actually write Citizen Kane, probably taking some perspective from that experience at Hearst Castle.
Just to be clear, the organ grinder's monkey is a monkey that plays the organ.
I think
that is intended to be like a puppet for powerful men, or at least beings more powerful than himself.
Maybe, but I think what happens is a person grinds the organ like the little hurdy-gurdy, and the monkey on a leash dashes about and collects coins from the audience in his little vest and fez hat.
Okay, now that we've cleared that up. And Mank was the organ grinder monkey, right?
I guess so. Although Mank maybe came into his own, and it was meant to suggest that Wells couldn't have done without him, that Hearst maybe did deserve the dressing down that he received.
Wells? Maybe Wells was actually the monkey.
Maybe.
Or one of many monkeys.
Because for as well regarded as Orson Welles is, he certainly didn't come off as being the good guy.
No, but he's not necessarily the bad guy. He's just kind of single-minded, self-consumed artist type. And, you know, he does set the story in motion, right? So Mank gets into the car accident, and shortly thereafter, when he's in traction or some kind of, you know, terrible-looking recovery position, Orson Welles approaches him and he was like, I know you're all busted up, but can you write a screenplay for me? And so then they go and he starts on the screenplay where Houseman sets him up in where did Grandma live?
Oh, in Victorville?
Yeah.
I felt like it was the low position. He was the organ grinder monkey in the lowest of society, convalescing out in the desert, out in the middle of nowhere, all busted up. But he used his mind to write Citizen Kane, and I think I would get a lot more stuff done if I had someone to take dictation and to write everything down that I said. Way more stuff. But it was a stark contrast, and it really helped me with the chronology jumps to be able to distinguish him convalescing out in the sticks with Hearst up on his hill in the castle surrounded by marble.
Like, it wasn't like, hey, let's put Mank in his place. I think that the intention was to separate him from his vices, right? Like, literally dry him up out in the desert and give him no access to drink, to drugs. And it wasn't like to ostracize him, but it was to kind of give him the best possible opportunity to actually be creative, free from vices.
Yeah, but the visual wasn't lost on me. And apparently writers have their vices, man. You're not going to get the writing out of him if he doesn't get his booze before bed.
And what was the deal with the Mickey? Like, Orson Welles slipped a Mickey in one or all of those drinks inside of the toolbox?
I don't know. Well, I mean, they were second all.
I just feel like there's nothing, like everything that's like drug related back in the day, like old timey days, were called Mickeys. Like, what exactly is a Mickey?
I don't know, because I don't do drugs and I've never tried to slip drugs to other people.
But you know about them.
Well, I get that. I think Mickeys are sedatives, which the second all is. They weren't Mickeys, they were Sickies. Seckies.
Well, apparently they did him in. He did the one and then he like almost died. And then he did two and he was like fine and riding away.
I guess.
I'm just saying, I wasn't tracking the whole drug thing.
I didn't track it either because I kind of didn't care. Like, he was going to get his fix one way or another, whether it be the drugs, which I don't know that the effect would have been all that different. It might have been, I mean, how do you dry someone out from their downer addiction and then provide them with a whole suitcase full of prescription strength downers?
Yeah,
I don't know how
that.
It works.
How are those downers okay, but the alcohol that he had delivered in the crate was like so offensive to Rita?
I don't know,
to
man.
Mrs. A.
But she got behind it anyway, because all you got to do is tell a story. He probably had that story all manufactured. Be like, if anyone asks you what your loyalty is to me, I saved your entire village. Got it? Now here's some money.
Well, it justified Fraulein Frieda's presence. Like, you're like, I'm not sure why there's a German housemaid enabler there, but as soon as they talked about Mankville or Manktown or whatever they're going to call it, like, then I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess.
Okay, so let us get to the part that was most unsettling about Mank for me. Clearly established that when he died of alcohol-related health issues, 11 years later, he was how old?
Like 50-something?
55, which made him, in this movie, Gary Oldman. Hollow-eyed, jowly, old-ass Gary Oldman was supposed to be my age in this movie. And even Kelly was like, no one thinks that dude is 44 in this movie, right? I mean, Mank must have been on it because that alcohol must have taken a toll because Gary Oldman's like 60, right?
He's 62. And I mean, I guess according to the math, he's playing a 44, 45-year-old.
Oh, man, that's depressing.
But that's what drug and drink will do to you.
Marion was by far the youngest major player, I guess, and she was almost in a way like a plaything of these rich and powerful elite. Whereas arguably Mank was of what I considered to be of the same age, roughly the same age as Mayer. They're in the same circles, but their orbit is different. Because I was thinking the whole time, you have to be an older, established gentleman to be able to write something as heady and as encompassing as Citizen Kane.
Well, I guess in writer years, he was probably pretty old.
I guess so. But those writer years showed up on his face because Gary Oldman, not a young dude. And I think he looks nothing like Mank. And he was in favor of a Hannibal level layers of makeup. And David Fincher was like, no, I just want a minimalist look. I really want to get the feel and essence of a person. And I don't need you to look like Mankiewicz, who nobody knows what he looks like. I've seen the movie. I still don't know what Mankiewicz looks like.
I don't think it's important.
Yeah, exactly. And so that means that he didn't have a tremendous amount of aging makeup. I know that he had dark circles I hope he had dark circles under his eyes. Gary Oldman has his own demons, but man, he wasn't looking no 44 to me.
The thing that aged him, I mean, yeah, he was looking pretty tore up, but he was looking kind of paunchy and swollen. And remember how Ben Affleck looked in The Way Back, like kind of puffy.
Yeah, puffy.
He looked kind of puffy.
Honestly, I think though, because I recall Gary Oldman being bearded in recent years, and I got to say that for me, a lot of it was the neck, was a little bit of a waddle neck. He's got some puffy neck happening, which definitely ages a person, and which terrifies me to my very core. I think that if I were going to have plastic surgery, it would be on the neck.
We'll start saving now because that ain't cheap. But everyone was younger back then. Like men had like jobs and homes and kids at like 25.
Yep. And you see Orson Welles, who's a major player. And you're like, that dude's 26. Do you know what I was doing when I was 26? Nothing.
Playing video games in mom's
I think I was working.
bedroom?
No, I was working at the Cheesecake Factory.
You ever swipe a cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory?
Not swipe, but I got a 25% discount. But overall feel of Mank, I think, was one of great care. They went to great pains to make a very certain kind of movie for maybe to get everything out of it that the filmmakers intended, a very specific kind of viewer. I am definitely not that viewer, but I was willing to go along with Mank because it has a lot of high-profile filmmakers, and we're in this strange place now where all of a sudden movies by revered directors and actors pop up under the illusion of being free on Netflix.
Well, Fincher's movies have never been known for their accessibility.
I mean, there's only so much relevance that this movie can have in the modern time, which I think, if there's a drawback to Mank, is definitely the biggest one.
I think that Mank is not a movie made for... Yeah, Mank is a movie made for a specific, very specific person or
very
audience.
Lonely mountain men.
It's not even for Hollywood insiders. It's like for Hollywood insiders like mom and dad who loved the cinema in the 40s and 50s or something. The audience that would know and understand the story and embrace the story is so esoteric and small and specific that I have to believe that this movie isn't meant for them. This movie is, like JFK, meant to be confounding.
Take it easy.
It's meant to make you feel like you're getting a glimpse into a world that you wouldn't otherwise have any access
to confuse the eye and confound the understanding.
We're not going to Willie's costume parties. We are not inside the studio echelon boardrooms. We're not in writer meetings. I mean, some of us are. But this is intended to give us a glimpse into this world so that we can feel like the outsiders that we are, but that we have some kind of special access. This little ticket to ride in Mank's world for a time. And I think in that sense, if that is true, then I would say that Mank is successful in giving us that peek, this glimpse into this world that we wouldn't otherwise see. Mank, I think, achieves what it set out to achieve, and therefore it's good.
Mank, a film starring Gary Oldman, directed by David Fincher, for specifically David Fincher to watch and enjoy. I can't give Mank a bad review because I feel like I would look stupid in doing so. This movie is beyond my ability to comprehend, so I had to revert to the base level of film watching that I resort to, which is typically the excellence in execution, and marvel at Gary Oldman's transformative abilities. That said, I think he was a little bit wonky. Maybe he was a little bit too drunk. He was Nicolas Cage level comic drunk, stumbling around, and yeah, it's delightful kind of vibe. He actually played a drunk soldier on an episode of Friends, probably 20, 25 years ago now. And his diatribe and his monologue reminded me more of the drunken Friends character than Gary Oldman of old, Gary Oldman. But otherwise, fun to watch. You can tell that this movie was not crafted by slouches. And as such, I tried to regard it on a high level of filmmaking. In that way, it was successful. It might have been just slightly inaccessible to me. So I give it an all right rating because it is not a poorly made or executed movie. It was actually fairly entertaining to watch, but it was all right and nothing spectacular. If you got something out of Mank that I didn't get, feel free to let us know because I would love to not look stupid. And therefore, it's an all right movie.
There you got it. An all right from Wes, a good from Iris. And not exactly an enjoyable film, but a film to kind of marvel at in terms of its execution. We'd love to know what you think. 818-835-0473 is our hotline. Give us a call. Leave us a voicemail or whatevermovies@gmail.com. Not exactly a holiday movie, but definitely a movie to kick off our award season set of reviews on Or Whatever Movies. Please like, subscribe, share, follow, all those good things. Be well, stay safe. Happy holidays. See you next time.